The beauty of addressing people in government, you then have a list of protocol in front of you. This morning I have none. So I'll say, can I adopt the protocols ahead of me? Anyway, our Balozi, Thigo, and our CS, Madam Mercy, the organizers, starting with Hari, and the industry players and government officials, good morning. Being told to give keynote is, can put a lot of pressure on an individual. I hope I don't disappoint you. I hope I meet your expectations. I have a PowerPoint presentation. I don't know if we're able to put it up. If not, we will just go ahead and address as it is. Just coming straight from what we had this morning. And before I go there, I want to thank Mercy, who is here today, Madam Mercy. Many of you may not know or may have forgotten, and I want to agree with Hari that this office would not be in existence if it was not for Madam Mercy. Please clap for her. And I don't say this because she's in the room. Someday when I write, I'll talk about it. Before this office was established, believe me, I used to drive my small red car. Mercy is the person who gave me the first car, the first driver, and the first office to sit on. So this office owes a lot to Communication Authority, and then when she was the CEO, because she went to the board. It's at the board where this was passed, and that is why this office exists. Because it's true, be told, it takes minimum of 3 to 5, 6 years for an office to be established if we did not have that soft landing from Communication Authority through Mercy. We really thank and appreciate you. You have a place in the Office of the Data Commissioner, and also this country in terms of being a task force leader for the Data Protection Act. So please always remember that from us to you. Having said that, I guess the PowerPoint is not there. I will address you from where I am. Quickly, I'll go through. I was given an interesting topic in terms of balancing digital transformation drivers. And when we speak about digital transformation driver, and a lot has been spoken to, because today, today when we talk about data protection, the question is, where is the balance? Because many people will say, in this era of AI, which is one of the key issues in terms of our conversations today, and Balozi Thigo is here. We really thank you for representing Kenya in whichever capacity. What does that mean? Internet of Things, blockchain, big data, and cloud computing. All these new emerging issues around digital transformation. But then, even as we speak about this, we have security concerns. We have one of the biggest issues that we have is confidentiality and integrity. And speaking in the room to people who are in tech, that is always a question. Somebody will ask, why are we making sure that the information we are collecting is confidential and its integrity is being upheld? That is a question we often have to reflect on. And then, of course, the other concern when it comes to data security concern is storage. And storage has become a big concern because what people are asking, where are we storing our data? And does our regulatory framework allow us to store data? And in the era of digital transformation and under the economic transformation agenda and the bottom-up economic transformation, and also where we've seen everything has moved online and the services, the concern is, where is this information being stored? Is it allowed under the Data Protection Act? We've had concerns, and one of the biggest concerns, and Ben will tell you, is cloud computing. And when we were having these conversations, there was pushback. How can you insist about data localization? And when you insist about data localization, Kenya does not have enough or adequate data centers to be able to store data locally. But is that the case? I will leave it up to you. So that was one of the concerns we'd hear a lot in terms of storage of data. However, Kenya has grown, and you are seeing you're seeing more solution coming up in terms of data localization to make sure that we can store our data locally. I'll tell you, there is no harm. The conversation around data localization falls around sovereignty. And we can have this conversation back and forth. But the proponents of data sovereignty will ask, when if something goes fundamentally wrong, where are we going to? I'll give you our own examples as the Office of the Data Commissioner when it comes to storage of data and some of the challenges we have. Many of the applications that we utilize are not Kenyan developed application. And many of these applications are not stored in Kenya. Some of them, for instance, the digital lenders, when there's a violation of one of the apps, and we insist on having conversation because the act has extraterritorial powers. When we insist on having access, we get pushback because that data is not here. We need a mutual legal assistance to be able to access this information. This is a challenge in as far as data security is concerned. So you must always think about the balance between data localization vis-a-vis what it means in terms of data sovereignty. Some countries have gone extreme. They've insisted that information that has to do with their citizen must be stored locally and within the region. Some of the challenges we are also seeing is that some of the companies, private companies, they are finding a resistance in some of those markets within the region where there is an insistence that they must build data centers within the region. The question to you in this room, what solution are we offering? Because our Data Protection Act is vibrant. It allows both storing locally and also having a copy here and storing in the cloud. Are we utilizing this, and what opportunity lies, and what is the balance? How can we make sure that even as we discuss issues around storage of data, that we make sure that the data for citizen is safe and can be accessed at any given time? The other question is about issues that when it comes to data security is around accuracy. There's always concern whether the information that we collect on behalf of our data subject is accurate, and availability and reliability. But what are the concerns in as far as data security is concerned? The first one is the right of the individual. The interesting thing is, and I say this is, when we talk about the right of individuals, I hope we realize we used to see a lot of pushback at times, Madam Mercy and Higo, when we write to government officers and ask them about data protection, they ask us, what business is it of ours? I mean, me, I'm doing my work. Why are you asking me about the right of a data subject? How is it my business? But please, what the Data Protection Act came to do is to re-engineer. It's an issue of trust. And believe me, when people trust you, they give you more of their information. So it's important for us as government officers in the room to remember the Data Protection Act, even as it put in place the issue around right to privacy under the Constitution, there was an issue of making sure that the rights of individuals are taken care of. And what are their rights? The rights to access. We've seen that because when people come to us at times, some of the complaints we have is we see people complaining that I wanted to access certain information from a certain organization and they've refused to give me my information. What are you going to do in government to make sure that when those kind of requests come to you, you actually provide them? Because it is lack of provision that then becomes a problem. The other one is a right to be forgotten. Even though it's not absolute, you need to demonstrate to the data subject that you cannot keep the information forever. And we have often said the need to opt out. When you develop your system, please can you make sure they are opt-out systems, they are opt-out in terms of your systems. The other one I would like to say in terms of the privacy concern is data breach. I don't know why. Perhaps, Madam Mary, you can tell me, why do people fear reporting when they have a data breach? How many have reported a data? How many have not had a data breach or a hack threat? They think I'm actually doing an assessment, then I'll come after them. How many in the room? I can almost bet on a scale of 1 to 10, 8 of us. It could even have been phishing. But we don't report. Yet it's a legal requirement under the Data Protection Act. But why is it important for us to report a data breach? A data breach prepares us in a way that we are able to assess what went wrong and how will we address it to avoid similar circumstances recurrence in the future. So I want to encourage us in the room because, and then we panic. We think, I don't know why we panic when there is a data breach. By the way, for your information, when it comes to cybersecurity and those kind of threats, is not whether it will happen. It is when it happens. So there's a requirement in terms of security concerns to make sure you report the data breach to the Office of the Data Commissioner within 72 hours. There's a template that explains to you the how that is done. And if you're having concerns, just write to us so that we're able to explain. The other concern in terms of, because I was told to speak about the issues around the balancing security, privacy, and digital transformation, is surveillance capitalism. There was this conversation earlier, and I'm glad the speaker ahead of me said, it feels nice to export e-citizen to the rest of Africa and also the rest of the world. But think about it when it comes to capitalist surveillance. Are we on top of things? Or we are consumers? Are we the ones very happy to share our information? How many of that information, how much are we sharing? How much are we sharing? Or we are happy to share all the information and then a third party somewhere, Ben, this is not targeting you. Somebody somewhere is creating all the value and all the shillings on our behalf. It's not even listed on our stock exchange. What does that mean for us? We are consumers. We don't have our own solutions. Isn't that one of the challenges? That we are propelling this capitalism for surveillance and not thinking through in terms of what it means for our own security as far as data protection is concerned. The other concern for us from a privacy perspective is data sharing. There's a lot of information we share across the board, but we don't have protocols. A question was posed to me. How many of us received an SMS yesterday that your information has been transferred? Or the rest of them were not, they don't have universal health. What did you think? Why? Why they were sharing information? Did you read the act? Did you realize that actually as soon as this happened, 1st of October, you now belong to another organization? Did we? We didn't read the print, isn't it? That is part of data sharing. I'm using that as an analogy. But just to move away from that without necessarily addressing that concern, think about Estonia. Estonia is one of the countries that is highly rated in terms of how far they have gone in as far as tech is concerned. But what is different between them and us? When it comes to matters data sharing, you get a prompt. It asks you, your information is going to be shared with this organization. What is your view? Madam Mercy, I hope we can get there. As an office in terms of intervention, the reason why data sharing can be a concern because the protocols are different for different organizations. We do not know why people will be asking for information for whatever. However, as a country, we need to reach a level where we can share information because there's a value. There's value in terms of sharing information and there's no duplication. We are the same government. You're asked 60 questions by this organization. You go to the next one, they ask you another 60 questions. You go to this one. Why not share this information? For us, from a data protection perspective, what we have done and currently is something that we are hopeful will be fast-tracked is a data sharing code so that we are able to share information across government and it makes our interaction and our experiences much easier. The other concern often has been consent, that I think people didn't realize consent is serious until they got a few fines in as far as photos are concerned. Consent is a concern when you're using the information, especially for commercial purposes. That is a privacy concern that we normally have a conversation around. And it's something that we as government always have to pause and ask. By the time we implement any project in government, always ask yourself, what are those lawful bases for processing this data? Is consent one of them? But also remember, consent is one of the weakest of them. Is there a lawful basis? Is there a contractual relation? So on and so forth. The other thing, when it comes to balancing, the thing we always have to remember from a data protection perspective is for us to uphold the principles of data protection. We have to make sure that we uphold the data protection principles, which are well articulated in the Data Protection Act. There must always be a lawful basis for processing personal data. The example, you got an SMS yesterday, please go and read the act by letter, especially the transitional clauses, which clearly says that on this date, this information moves from this organization to this organization. That is a lawful basis. Risk assessment, it's also important to make sure that as we embrace the technology, we undertake risk assessment. Some of the risk assessment, this came up, I didn't realize. We can move towards the end. Please move. Next slide, next. Next slide, next. I can use this. This one I skipped. It's something that we are all familiar with in terms of what the office is and what we do. So I'm on this slide where I'm saying risk assessment. And this is very important because we were not used to doing risk assessment when we embrace technology. It's always important to ask yourself, when it comes to any project, what are we likely to face? And that is why we insist on the data protection impact assessment. And you've seen, even in terms of AI, one of the things that is being discussed at length is the impact assessment and the ethical use of AI. And the reason why you do a risk assessment is for purposes of making sure that you identify what the risks are and also come up with mitigating strategies. When you don't identify where the risks are, you might be walking blindly or walking in a forest and getting into potholes and you don't know where you will end up. So it's so important to undertake a risk assessment. I'll say one of the challenges we have, Madam Mercy, when it comes to government, they ask the question, unatusumbua kwa nini? Hii maneno unashinda ukiniitisha ya data protection impact assessment. Si ni kazi ya serikali. But I think it's important for people to appreciate that, like I said earlier, the responsibility shifted from yourselves to the owner of data. And it's an issue of trust. When you're able to do a risk assessment, or in our case of Data Protection Act, the Data Protection Impact Assessment, it helps you to identify what are the high risks. And especially when you have huge data sets that you're sharing at different departments of government, it's important to undertake this so that you're able to come up with mitigating measures. Privacy by design and by default, we often say that. And what we have seen, and this mostly affects private sector, there's a disconnect between marketing and ICT. The people in marketing, I see people smiling in the room, I won't mention them. The people in marketing, what happens? They are quick to harvest all the information because you see, for them, the more information they have, the more they're able to reach out to and sell you different products. But people in privacy are saying, no, you need to reduce the amount of information. For instance, one of the principles on data minimization. And there's a clash in those two because this one wants more, this one wants less. So it's important as the design stage, as you do your projects in whichever way, you make sure that you embrace data protection by design and by default. And then finally, on governance, we are happy. 3-4 years ago, when we had this conversation, few boards took data protection seriously. They rarely added put any resources for purposes of data protection. We are happy to see there is a movement on data protection. Many companies today have data protection officers. We've seen data protection is something that the boards are taking very seriously in terms of compliance. We want to encourage it. It is still very slow in government. We still don't have data protection officers with us. For us, because at times these things will require either SRC or public service or SCAC, I would want to encourage you to see whether you can designate in the audit team one person who is responsible for data protection. That way you're beginning the compliance journey. Two, in terms of the governance, we are here in terms of giving advice as an office. And then three, this year we are very deliberate. Madam Masi, we'll be writing to different government officials, offices across the country for you to send us your officers to train them, because we've realized we've partnered with also Kenya School of Government. That course is available, but the uptake is still very slow. So we've decided to actually take the bull by the horn. We want to actually undertake capacity building ourselves so that at least the bare minimum, you're able to appreciate what this is. So that when we ask these questions or becomes a compliance issue, you're not caught on the wrong side of the law. As I conclude, I want to state the issues around, of course, the digital landscape is evolving, and it's important for us to balance between security in as far as data protection is concerned. We always have to take into account the ethical consideration, and we as policymakers have a role in terms of the regulatory framework and also in terms of making sure we are increasing transparency. For me, I believe that if you're caught in a conflict and you're not sure which way to go, the true north is always the rights of the data subject. You can never go wrong when you ask yourself, what is the true north? The true north is the right of the data subject. I'll say we've been lucky, or rather I would say you're lucky that we've had fewer complaints from government on government institutions, but it doesn't mean they are not coming. We haven't found any government or institution anywhere. We hope not, because that is not our aim. We hope that, and one of the things we have tried to do as an office, we've been very proactive. When we anticipate there is likely to be an issue, we actually go out of our way to hold round tables. That's why when people ask, are you not bringing any issues against government institution? You'll be surprised, behind closed doors, we go out of our way. We go out of our way because you don't want for the problem to find you at your doorstep. We will go to health, we will go to Huduma, we will go to agriculture to make sure as one government, we are also helping you in terms of compliance. We are here to help you in terms of the compliance journey. Call upon us in case of any clarification, and our office remains open for any discussion or conversation. Thank you very much.